Hi, all. Welcome back. Today, I wanted to share a deep personal story of when I knew I needed to seek professional help. I hope this video resonates with you. Enjoy. Okay, so the question I get a lot is what pushed me to get professional help? And in order to answer that, I've always had to go back a few years to explain and give context. So, so I've been with my company for 22 years. And I had thought I'd seen it all, I'd experienced it all, and been there, done that kind of mentality. And up until that point, uh, that was the case. It was, I was being assigned things, and I'd get through them no problem. And I had developed a reputation of being reliable, dependable, get things done. And as that grew, then I was thrown into more uh, problematic situations. So, for example, like projects that had fallen off the rails, or they were midstream and they needed somebody that had some expertise in a particular business area. So I'd be called in to help put it back on track. So I was known as a fixer. And it was a reputation that it was a blessing and a curse. Yeah. So, you know, whatever. It had its rewards looking back, but I mean, it was something that I always, in the back of my mind, worried about because I didn't really like going into those situations. I wanted smooth, like relatively smooth projects that we could just get started and we move along and we close. But that was never the case with me. So anyway, uh, I go back about 2.5 years ago. There was this regulatory change that was affecting all these entities in the financial industry, and the impacts were far-reaching. They touched several areas of our organization, if not all. And right off the bat, what hamstrung us was a combination of things. The initial set of definitions and rules that was provided by the regulatory body were vague. They're very general and lacked the detail needed in order to guide us through as to what exactly um, they needed in terms of data sets and all that kind of stuff. So on top of that, we really didn't have any experts in the organization that had dealt with this particular regulatory body specifically. And so we didn't really have a clear understanding of what the expectations were. So a year had passed, and we were far along into our planning, and then, as with anything, when as you get into the designing and building of things, regardless if it's a house or software, or you know gaps usually pop up. It's just the nature of the beast. It always does. And this was definitely no different. It's just that, again, the impacts were just all over the place, and we did not have the expertise at the time to be able to understand what the expectations were from external sources. So now, in the midst of all this, there's also conflicting personalities. There's a lot of agendas, political agendas. There's internal conflicts. So yeah, it was a rocky road. It was a rocky ship. And again, it's not something that I was not surprised by, but just because the fact of the vastness of the changes of where everything was happening, it made the impact of it even bigger. Like I felt it even more. So a lot of finger pointing a lot of finger pointing would happen. A lot of, oh, that's not my area, that's their area, it's not my problem. And I would hear that. That's exactly what I would hear from people I'd interview. Like, why are you talking to me? This has nothing to do with me. Go talk to them, and it's their problem. So it was a lot of that, and it was difficult to get cooperation and some collaboration because of that friction. So after a while, I mean, naturally, it's you know, how do you wake up every morning having to face that kind of reality where people are just miserable? People are tired, they're exhausted, they're annoyed, they're frustrated, all of those things, and you have to deal with it, day in and day out. Then we got deep into execution, which is we were doing testing, and I was providing us a support role, and again things were coming up, and what really hit me the hardest was I was fearful that every day in every meeting that there would be a gap or something that I'd missed. God forbid, I'm human, I miss something. But to me, missing something felt like a huge failure, and it would affect my reputation. Therefore, it would affect my year-end performance, and resulting in the fact that I wouldn't be getting, or I would not be eligible for a bonus if there was a bonus payout. Well, what does that mean? Well, it meant to me that I'd be a failure as a father, I'd be a failure as a husband, and I would be a failure as a provider. I would not be able to support my family. Um, because there were some big ticket items that had to be purchased. As with anything, new furnace, we need a new AC, we need a new refrigerator, we need this and we need that, and I was so fearful of not meeting those expectations that it added that much more pressure on top of me every day. So every mistake or um, every question that would come up, I would immediately feel like, oh crap, like I think I missed this, or somehow I found a way in my mind that it led to me, even though in the end, in some cases, no, it was somebody else's mistake, or it was just generally the team's um, misinterpretation. Because again, it was a steep learning curve for a lot of people, but somehow my mind found a way to to put the blame on me. So it became it. Yeah, it was essentially navigating a minefield every day. It came to a point where I would make sure I save every single email that was circulated you know, amongst the team, because I wanted to have proof that I had done what I was supposed to do. So yeah, it did come. It did come. There was a situation where uh, I wasn't being directly blamed, but the result of my outputs were being questioned. So I took it personally. So I went back and I spent at least a couple hours compiling all these emails for you know that were effectively pointing the finger back at back at the accuser. So I had everything from date, timestamps, and I even included summarizations as to this person said this, and that's why we didn't do it. Literally, I had like 10 or 12 different emails in sequence. And I just sent it to the whole group. I said, here you go, FYI, you know, whatever that question was, it's not because of this. And I took everything personally. I took everything as a personal attack because, like I said, every every issue where there was a question, I would take it like, oh, so you're questioning my work now? Because if it affects my performance and affects, downstream everything else, I worry about my job, all that was all, you know, part of it. So it was draining. And then also I would, so at this point I'm exhausted. I'm to say I was tired, it was such an understatement. I was burned out. Yeah, I was burned out. I was just mentally fried. I've never felt anything like that before, where it was just my resources here were just gone. And, you know, my wife would try to engage and try to, feel her way through and try to understand what's going on. And I'd be like, I'm just trying to turn my brain off. I really don't want to talk right now. And, as a partner who's trying to support you, like it's very difficult if they don't know what's going on. So it was frustrating for the both of us. I just didn't have the energy to share. I just didn't feel like going through it and living through those events again. Because each day was a roller coaster. And not only that, it was a roller coaster uh, every minute, every hour of the day. So it was just, I hit these crazy peaks and I come crashing down and I go up again, up and down, up and down, up and down. So imagine how I would feel at the end of the day, right? So what I tried to do, or what I thought was a way to handle it, would be to to make long weekends by taking off either a Friday or a Monday or both. And more often than not, I would be contacted for support, or I'd be contacted, hey, we've got these pressing issues, they need to be closed today. Please set up a meeting. And I'm like sitting here going, what the, I'm off. What are you talking about? Right? Like, I allowed them to, get into my personal space because I didn't know how to set boundaries. And that was later on. Well, I found out through my therapy work that, yeah, that was one of the issues, is that I really didn't set boundaries. I didn't I set expectations that I'm available 24/7 and I'm willing to do everything, including killing myself to get, to get the end of job. So it was my fault. But of course, in that moment, I was taking everything personally, and I was taking it as like, excuse me, like, I'm off today. What are you doing? So as I'm going through this, to make matters worse, I hear the whispers, I hear rumblings and, hearsay about people complaining about me behind my back. Saying I'm not doing this or I'm not doing that. I'm not attending this meeting. I'm not attending that meeting. Well, geez, there's only so much time during a day. I can only do so much, right? Like if you're in meetings all day, how are you expected to actually produce and deliver something, deliver output? How am I going to research? How am I going to analyze? How am I going to assess? How am I going to reach out to, it was all of those things. And now I'm hearing people are complaining about me. Like that one really pissed me off. That one really, like, if there was any way to really piss me off, that was it. And of course I took it personally. Because like, here I am killing myself. And for what? So that you can, you can attack me? And by the way, you're not even saying it to my face? That was the one that really hurt, because I'm all about owning mistakes, but if you're gonna sit there and accuse me on the sideline but not identify yourself, and I have to hear it through somebody else, like, come on, what is this? So I took it so badly. I took it so hard. I got so angry that, every day I felt like it was an indictment on my existence. And, it was life or death. I had to defend myself all the time. Like people that I did respect would just ask very general questions. And I would react in a way like, why are you asking that? We're done with that. We've already moved on. What's wrong with you? Right? Because I took it as a personal attack every single time. But it was just a matter because of some clowns that, you know, um, had an issue with me, which later, yeah, I did verify that, yeah, they did say things, but of course they didn't want to confirm it to my face. It's irrelevant now, but I mean, it was just a culmination of these situations, these feelings that were amplified. That's the key. I dealt with these kinds of things before, but it was just at a magnitude higher than usual. It was at a volume louder than I was used to. So, I would talk to myself. I would ask myself, like, what makes this situation so much more different than the previous ones that you've dealt with before? And I would just be like, there's just too many variables. There's way too many egos, way too many personalities, way too many agendas. I just couldn't navigate it. It was overwhelming, which would then lead to things like not sleeping well. I mean, sleep deprivation is real. If any of you have experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. When you don't sleep, your mind is not resting. That's basically what it is. Your mind is not at rest, and it's constantly churning. And that's how it was for days on end. I would not be sleeping, and yet here I am working after hours, weekends, and it was very difficult, not only on me but obviously on my family. I would often wake up. Well, I was already awake, but my eyes would be open before my alarm would go off, and I'd just be staring at the ceiling, frozen, immobile, paralyzed. I would start crying. I would be crying because had I moved or performed any motion towards getting up or getting ready meant it would be the start of the day, and I would have to face all of these demons again. And that right there was my breaking point. Having to face these challenges, it was too much. It was too much, way too much. So then, this one particular morning, I got up, but I was sitting on the side of my bed and I had my hands here. I had my head in my hands here, and I just started bawling. And my wife came by. She says, "What's going on?" Like, what? And I just said, "Honey, I'm broken. I can't keep it together anymore. I'm done. I just can't do this. And I'm tired. I'm exhausted. It's too much." And she says, "That's enough. Message your boss. Take a sick day. You can't go in today." So and that's what I did. But I mean, it was a Band-Aid solution that, so I would do those a few more times, but it didn't help because the way that I was before, I would keep ruminating. I would keep thinking, no matter how many days I was off, or it would just bother the hell out of me because I knew I'd have to face it again tomorrow. Eventually, I said, I need to take some time off. I don't care what phase of the project we're in. I don't care how critical. No, I'm taking time off. So yeah, so I managed to get 3 weeks off, and I remember there was a conversation. It's so vivid in my mind. It's actually burned in there. I'll never forget it. So a stakeholder calls me and says, "Hey, I hear you're taking 3 weeks off." And I said, "Yes." Inside, I'm like, "Yeah, so what is it to you?" Right? And they asked, "So what do we call that?" And I was shocked. I said, "What do you mean? What do we call that?" I said, "We call it I'm off. It means you leave me alone." And their immediate response was even more shocking. I was so surprised that they would say, "Well, that's the thing." And I was like, "What thing?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What do we call that? And that's the thing. I'm friggin' off for 3 weeks. You know, jump off a cliff and leave me alone. And like that whole conversation was just a culminate was symbolic of everything that had affected me to this point. I had enough. I had taken so much. I had had external things coming, and everything was just combined, and it was just this this whole ball of negative energy just building inside. It was going to explode at some point. So yeah, so those 3 weeks didn't really do much, um, because I knew that I had to eventually come back. So when I came back, same situation. Everybody's still blaming each other, and just because I was away, by coming back, it actually made matters worse because now they had another outlet. Oh, Mark's back here. He can go deal with this and he can do that. And I'm like, no, that's got nothing to do with me. What am I going to deal with that for? Right? It was, oh my God, it was such a miserable time. Yeah, it was just a daily exercise of constantly defending myself from, from the deficiencies that unfortunately were just inherent to the organization. That's just how it was. And then I would have, I would vent to some family, and some friends, and the most disappointing part of that was they would just dismiss it. Yeah, I would vent about what I was going through. I would vent what people were saying, or what I heard, and all this stuff, and it was hurtful because I was expecting some sort of um, empathy, but what I got was well, that's life. Toughen up. Or you're too soft. You're thinking too much. You're too invested. It's just a job. It's just work. Yeah, you need to take a break. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? So again, to be fair, they're not in the situation, but I just was like, what did you not understand about what I just said? And again, through my work, I later understood that my expectations were not fair to be placing it on them to be seeking that kind of support. And I feel like being dismissed like that was the most hurtful part of all of it. Is that in a way I was already, trying to reach out for help, but I just wasn't getting it. And, I just wasn't phrasing it or positioning it in a way that, hey, look at me, I'm in trouble, I need some help. I just couldn't find the right way to say it. And also, especially with my wife, I was just too afraid. I was too afraid to admit that I needed help. My pride, my ego, all of that. So then later, having a conversation with my wife, and she says, we can't keep going like this. You can't keep going like this. You really need to go get some help. And the conversation was very real, very grounded, and I felt, of course, I felt afraid. I was terrified because I was admitting to myself that, am I crazy? Oh, I'm one of those. Yeah, I'm one of those now. I'm a psycho. But you know what? I mean, I did it. I reached out to some specialists, and yeah, we began the journey. Now the journey will never end, but there's progress. I'm doing much, much better than I was two and a half years ago. Before all that though, so I found that in those early days I found that in those early days of therapy that there were a combination of factors at work. There were a combination of factors in play. So not only experiences from work, but also how I was personally. The problem was I didn't even know who I was. I didn't have an identity. I was putting on a facade at work. I was somebody else. Um, Meaning I was very outgoing. I was very passionate, very aggressive, get things done. Whereas, in my home life, I was very quiet, shy, very introverted, passive. I'm a homebody. I love staying home because it's safe, right? It provided a safe, comforting zone for me. And whenever the two worlds collided, that's where problems would arise. Where I was trying to maintain two different personalities, and because one was being overloaded, right? The effects of that would leak into here, my personal life. And then because I still had issues here that I didn't know existed, then this was affected and this would blow up. So it just became a huge um, cocktail of disaster. But I've been doing the work. I'm proud of the work. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be here today without the support of my wife and my children. No way. No way. That is the that is the God that is God that is the God's honest truth. Everybody needs a support system. Nobody does these things alone. And if there's anything that you can take away from this, is the first step is acknowledging that you need help. That is the very first step and the most difficult one. Because there's a lot of uh, social factors and interpersonal issues that we grapple with when we get to that point where we finally succumb to what we assume was going to be the case, which is I need some help. Like, asking for help is is difficult because it's something that, for me anyway, it's not something that I can see. It's not tangible, right? It's not a physical ailment that you can just go to your doctor and say, hey, you know what, I cracked a rib, or I broke an arm, and sure, then there's procedures and ways to address it. But when it's up here, it's it's very difficult to visualize and see, tangibly where the issues are, what it is, right? Like if you're working on a car, you can tell right away from the sound of a faulty part. You can identify the part, remove it, repair it, replace it, whatever. But when it's up here, it's extremely difficult for me to visualize that and understand and go, oh, that's where the problem is, and diagnose. Like it's very difficult to diagnose. And that's why, seeking professional help is the way to go. Now, looking back, of course, I mean, hindsight is 2020, but looking back, I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I had gone to therapy 20 years ago. But you know what? It is what it is. I'm here now, and I'm happy. I'm much happier than I was before. Um, Life will always have ups and downs. The ocean never has calm waters. When I say calm, like it's never still, it's always moving. Right? One of my idols, Bruce Lee, would say, water. No, I'm not going to cut that out. Like, one of the analogies I gave my therapist was my life up until that point was essentially a serene pond. Picture a pond. And every little disruption or every bit of doubt or questioning I'd receive, it would be like people throwing pebbles at that pond, causing ripples. But my experiences on that project was they were no longer pebbles, they were boulders. So they were just giant boulders that people were just going at it and chucking it into my pond, and it was just causing these huge eruptions of water. So it was just causing so much chaos up here. So now the way that I look at things is, yeah, I mean, that pond will have occasionally pebbles thrown into it. And when people try to throw boulders at it, they can try, but when they do throw a boulder at it, the boulder just lands and it doesn't cause anything. It just sits there. Yeah, it just, because I've learned to not carry that weight. Yeah. I read somewhere. I wish I wrote it down, but 99% of the world's problems are interpersonal. Yeah, it's because we're human. Whether it's trauma from our childhood or upbringing, and uh, things that you've experienced in your teens, into your 20s, into your 30s, and so on and so forth. We carry all of those. And the secret to living a better life, really, is understanding how to frame them and pivot. That's what it is. You can take a negative, reframe it into a positive and move away from it. We're going to explore more of those things in other videos, but I just felt compelled to share with you my personal story so that you understand where I'm coming from. You understand why I sought help, why I started this channel, and why I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned. I hope you can take away some positives and some perspective and think and ask yourself, how are you doing? Number one, ask yourself, ask yourself, how am I? How am I feeling? And if you come to the conclusion that you're not happy, okay, well, why are you not happy? Okay, Alexa, cancel. If you come to the conclusion that you're not happy, you're miserable, listen back to my story and really consider what's at stake. What I mean is it really worth it to suffer? Because nowadays there's a lot of tools, a lot of professionals out there now that can help you out of it. Right? Do yourself a favor and just ask. There's no harm in asking. I think that's the biggest thing that I want to impart on folks is there is nothing to lose by just asking the question. Do I have a problem? I'm not sure. Or I have a problem. Can you help me with it? Nothing to lose. You got nothing to lose. Right? So I wish somebody would speak to me that way, and then I would be like, oh yeah, well, that's true. Like, maybe I can give it a try. Well, anyway, I hope this helped you, and I look forward to giving you more content, more ways to help cope, and share more personal stories and examples that you can relate to. And I look forward to discussing our mental journey together. I'll see you on the next one.